It's a real test for both teams. I suppose Abbeylara favourites from before a ball was kicked in the championship, and well, they've probably justified their favouritism. They've knocked out one of the heavy hitters of the last few years in Longford Slashers without their talismanic Niall Sheridan, and with Pádraig Berry probably they're saying 50% fit in that game. So not only that, but they have a very strong team right throughout, and the nucleus of the 99 side is still there, and the team then that of course historically won their first championship final when they became champions in 2000. 8 players I believe of that team still playing on their first 15. That's a very experienced nucleus of a team, and of course spearheaded now by Niall Sheridan. He'll be returning for the semi-final. Big boost to Abbeylara to have him back, but in the likes of Kevin Smith in midfield, and they can also switch him in, as we saw against Slashers, switching him in and out from midfield into the forward line as well. You know, they have some very experienced players. Ledwich is in the back line. Dromard on the other hand then, a team that have won it twice in the last 4 years, in 05 and 07, looking to again come and try and win one in this year of 09. Again, they have players from that 99 final when both clubs met as well, and I think they have 4 of that starting team from 99 still there, so they're looking to win 4 titles out of from since 99, or in 10 or 11 years, looking to win 4 titles, looking to win 3 this decade as well, like Abbeylara, like Clonguish, another team that's still there in the last 4 as well. Whichever of those 3 I suppose win it will become the team of this decade, the only team to have 3, but of course Ballymahon are there, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But Dromard, I suppose they have had good wins over Colmkill in the first round, and understrength champions in that very first game. It put Colmkill on the back foot. As we saw, they were subsequently knocked out, but in the likes of Jamesy Martin and Cian Mimna and Francis McGee, we all know the capabilities of that forward line. The last day it was Jamesy Martin who shone, as he has done right throughout the championships of the last 10 years. He really has. He proved himself again the last day when they needed a leader up front, when it wasn't happening maybe for McGee and Mimna. Jamesy was the man who stepped up to the mark. He got the goal when they were under pressure in that first half, and he also led by example. With the work rate was very high in that second half. But it really has the makings of a classic game. Diarmuid Masterson in the centre of the field, I suppose, against Kilo. He, in the last 10-15 minutes of the game, Dromard scored 1-5. Masterson scored the goal. He had already scored a goal earlier in that half. His contribution in the last 15 minutes probably was the difference between the two sides. Kilo really threw everything at Dromard, and probably the lack of experience in the end told in that quarter final. They had Thomas Nolan on fire up front, but they probably persisted maybe too much with it when they did fall behind in the last 10 minutes. Dromard scored 1-5 without reply. They showed a lot of experience. They're going to need all that experience against the team who are favourites. Other people now are putting Dromard in as favourites, so it really has all the makings and the hallmarks of what should be a classic game. But then tactics will play an awful lot in it, and Sean Hagan, as manager of the Abbeylara team, knows Dromard lads inside out. Obviously won the championship as manager with them in 07, and of course as a player in 99 when he would have been marked by one end of Ledwich, of course, who's still playing centre half back that day, probably corner back, or he could play anywhere, probably picking up one of the key Dromard forwards. And Kevin Smith, will he be marking the Bull Masterson at midfield? That's a big question. Will Enda Mackin decide maybe to play the Bull Masterson in a different position to try and keep him out of the traffic and get him on the ball at Dromard's will, instead of Abbeylara trying to keep the ball away from him probably? So all this battle of wits, Enda Mackin against Sean Hagan, 2 former teammates, of course. They won the medals together. Now they're on the line. It's a battle of wits, but it has all the hallmarks, as I said, of going to be a classic game. And I suppose its success of the championship has been, of these groups that we've had this year for the first time, I think that it has led to the 4 strongest teams in the county making their way into the final, into the semi-finals, and probably that in itself is a good thing, because now obviously with a straight draw in a championship, you can have stronger teams playing against each other and maybe knocking each other out. So I suppose the groups have done that anyway for the championship this year. I think they've thrown up probably the strongest 4 teams in the 2 championship semi-finals.
Alright, the other semi is Ballymahon and Clonguish.
Again, people at the start of the year would have always said that Clonguish would be there at the business end of it, and sure enough, they have marched through to a semi-final undefeated. Ballymahon, likewise, they were in a tough group as well, along with Longford Slashers, and well, they were expected to be there or thereabouts, and true enough, they've managed to get themselves there too. Trevor Smullen as a player manager, interesting, he didn't start himself the last day, but came on after 17 minutes when the game settled down, and he could see, maybe got a look at the game to see how it was faring out. injured and then brought himself on. So it's an unusual one in the GA to have a player manager, I suppose, and Trevor has an awful lot of experience down the years, and of course Ballymahon still have the nucleus of that team. We spoke about the experience of Abbeylara and Dromard, but the experience players on the Ballymahon side, right through the core of the team, you have the players that won their championship for them, the first and historic championship for Ballymahon back in 2002, and in the likes of Ken Lovell and Ken Cooney, and right throughout the team, obviously Smullen and Alan Hudson as well, and of course their chief marksman then is Mark Connor. 7 points the last day out of 11 in a tough game against Arda. Now, people have said about the Arda game and it was the worst game of the 4 in the quarter-finals, but any time that you beat Arda by 6 or 7 points, you have a fair day's work done, and Ballymahon knew when they came out of that game that they were after being in a very tough game. Arda won't let they played to their strengths, and nobody can blame them for that, the same as any county teams maybe defending strongly and everything, but still Ballymahon managed to get the 11 scores against them and only conceded 4. So they're a hard team to score against. Longford Slashers found that out earlier in the group stages as well. And Clonguish are going to have their work cut out. Of course, great history between them as well, from back in 03 and 04 when they played 3 finals. And Clonguish, again, they have plenty of experience in Paul Barden, David Barden, Paddy Dowd, and that's only just to name a couple of the fellas playing with the county, like Enda Williams is playing football of his life really at centre half back for Clonguish, and we all know what he did for the county this year. Really was outstanding, and he seems to know to be instinctively in the right place at the right time. Obviously a good sign of a centre half back. And so Clonguish, as I said, they're going to be there or thereabouts, expected to be, and sure enough, here they are. But I suppose question marks sometimes asked about their defence. They've conceded a good bit, but when you have players that are able to score with abandon, which they are when they get on top, and Clonguish have proven it over the years, when they get on top, they might get a 10-minute spell in that second half, which they've done in the last couple of games, and they can just kill a team off by scoring 1-6 or 1-7. They did it against Kilo, and they also did it the last day against Columkill when they went in the quarter-final just 1 point down, and within 10 minutes of the second half the game was virtually over. But of course the goals came for them as well, maybe one of a fortuitous nature, but that's it. The ball has to be in that area for a fortuitous goal to be scored. But again, because of the history between them just in this decade alone, Ballymahon and Clonguish, it's a game not to be missed by the supporters of football in Longford. I think it's going to be a cracker, and it could be the best of the 2 games, because tactics might play an awful lot in the Saturday evening game. The Sunday evening game is going to be 2 teams with a lot of history going at it, hammer and tongs, and you have Trevor Smullen obviously pulling the strings, but he has lots of good backroom help when he's on the field as well, and Liam Doherty and Liam Belton then 2 wise men as well on the line. And of course Belton, of course himself a former fullback for the county, lots of experience, the Keenan man, but of course he's local man living in Newtown Forbes as well. So I think Newtown Forbes people in general probably feel that this team deserve to win another championship. They've won 2 this decade, and they've won an awful lot of leagues, they've lots of medals, but they dearly love to win another championship. And I think that they feel that they've underachieved maybe this decade, but they would feel that maybe it would be fitting for them to win the last championship of the decade, and to be named probably unofficially at least as the team of the decade. But there's a lot of football to be played before any of those 3, or if Ballymahon can match them by winning their second title. But if you want me to call it Fintan, I'd say I'll have to go with a Dromard Clonguish county final, but that's only just
and Dromard to edge it by any chance in that final now?
Well, we'll preview the final when the final is there, but for the semi-finals anyway, narrow wins after 2 great games, I believe, is going to be this weekend, and 2 narrow wins for Clonguish and Dromard. But I wouldn't put any money on it though.
Good man.